Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 129, cover dated January 1980. Now this would have been on sale in October-November 1979. The cover is by John Byrne, inked by Terry Austin. We've got a cover caption, "Save us from the Knights of Hellfire." We see the X-Men in action there, the trio of Colossus, Wolverine and Storm. They're actually in an ice cream parlor, a malt shop, and they're up against these figures that we haven't seen before in battle suits. Save us from the Knights of Hellfire. So who or what are they? Well, we'll find out inside the issue itself. Intriguing too to see in the cover corner box the heads of the current lineup of X-Men, because the lineup is about to change. Let's open this one up to the splash page, and it is a splash page that I've always thought was really excellent. We've got the title of the story there, God Spared the Child, and our creative team down here, Chris Claremont and John Byrne. So we don't have the breakdown of Claremont as scripter, Claremont on Byrne as co-plotters and Byrne as penciler, Terry Austin on inks, Tom Orzechowski on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. So we have a top-down 3-point perspective shot of the X-Men out on the landing strip on Muir Island. The Blackbird is fueled up and ready to fly. I love the details here in this particular image, the body language of the different characters. We've got Colossus standing apart from the team, and that's because he is ruminating on his killing Proteus in the previous issue. It's the first time he's taken a life, and so he's standing silently there in the background. Intriguing too that it looks like we've got conversations going on here among the different groups of characters on the ground. Looks like Jamie Madrox is maybe having words with Storm. Looks like there's some words there between Nightcrawler and Alex Summers. But the only conversation we get is that between Cyclops and Banshee. So Cyclops says, "The Blackbird's fueled and checked out, Sean. I guess it's time we were on our way." And Sean replies, "Aye, it's been good having a lot of you here these past few days. After that battle with Proteus, we all needed a rest. I'm sorry to see you go, Cyclops." So the X-Men are returning to the States. I love the work on this by Terry Austin. The inking, the hatching here that gives us a sense of the water on the concrete landing strip, as well as the work here around the light on the wing of the Blackbird. I like the implication of the wind blowing as well with Storm's cloak and Lorna's coat there, as well as our mantle. Maybe that's a mantle more than a coat. And Moira's skirt. It's also well done. The colours are well done too. Really love and have always loved this splash page. Let's continue with the 17 pages of story and art. Yes, that's right. There are only 17 pages of story and art in this issue, and yet it is so full of event characterization, setup for upcoming stories. It truly is incredible work by Byrne and Claremont. So Cyclops continues here and says, "I'm sorry you're not coming with us, Sean. Are you sure you won't reconsider your decision to leave the X-Men?" So Banshee has decided to retire, and that's because of the injury he's sustained, in part because of the injury he sustained in issue 119, where he lost his sonic scream. He says as much there in his dialogue, "Until me sonic scream heals, if it ever does, the Banshee is of no real use to you, boyo, and I'm needed more here." But he thinks to himself about another reason why he's there. So that's his, in a sense, cover story, but he's got emotional reasons for staying on Muir Island when he thinks, when we destroyed Proteus, both Moira's son and her husband died, as well as she knows we had no choice, but still, that kind of hurt goes deep. She'll be a long time recovering, and she can't do it alone. So that also is why Banshee is staying. Love the detail of the clay pipe that he's smoking. Scott says he understands, wishes them both well. Madrox here gets an offer to come with the X-Men. He turns that down. Cyclops shakes the hand of his brother there. They're not going to go with the X-Men either. Alex says, "As Havoc and Polaris, we may be superpowered mutants, but Alex Summers and Lorna Dane aren't X-Men. If you ever need us, just call and we'll come running. But otherwise, we want to live as normal a life as possible." So the two brothers embrace, and Alex wishes happiness between Scott and Jean as well, and then the Blackbird takes off. That's a really great panel there. I find it interesting, the decision here, an interesting choice to leave the characters in open silhouette for the colorist to fill in. I think it's all very effective. And Banshee calls after them, "Take care, X-Men, and may you be in heaven a half hour afore the devil knows you're dead." And that's a genuine Irish saying. It's not made up at all. Indeed, there was a print of that in my grandmother's house when I was young. So over here we have the X-Men returning to the States. And this is another interesting drawing. We get to see them all in profile here in the cockpit of the Blackbird, which Nightcrawler is flying. But the only one who gets his thoughts revealed to us is Colossus. He stood apart from the X-Men on the splash page because he's deep in thought about killing Proteus. Mine was the hand that slew Proteus, he thinks. I know he was evil incarnate, that it was his life or Moira's, but does that make what I did right? So Colossus is wrestling with his conscience. There's no answer to Peter Rasputin's anguished thoughts, declares the narrator. Only doubts about his life as the X-Man Colossus that gnaw insatiably at his heart and soul. As the Blackbird streaks westward at 5 times the speed of sound, rapidly overtaking a larger, slower corporate jetliner marked with the stylized logo of New York's legendary Hellfire Club. So you can just see it there on the tail fin of the jet, and then we get a shot of the inside of the jet. It's really well furnished. There's only one passenger, that's Jason Wingard. He's also taken great pains to become the most important person in Jean Grey's life, we're told. And he thinks to himself, each time it becomes easier to touch Jean's mind as our psychic rapport grows ever closer, and why not? I'm merely giving her a taste of some of her innermost forbidden needs and desires. This is really key and central to any analysis of Jean's transformation into Dark Phoenix. Within her angel soul, as in all our souls, lurks a devil, a yang counterpart to the surface yin. That is a leitmotif of Claremont's work, in particular his original 16-year run on the X-Men comics, that every person has an angel and devil inside, and the devil side of themselves can lead to their corruption, body and soul. And Wingard continues with his thoughts, all I'm doing is freeing that negative part of herself from its moral cage. Wingard smiles, concentrates, and miles away, Jean Grey's world suddenly turns topsy-turvy. So we've been seeing this in particular from issue 125 forwards, this darkening of Jean's world by virtue of the interference wrought by Mastermind, because that's who Jason Wingard is. That reveal will come in time. And here we go. Here's one of these time slips that she's been experiencing, time slips to the 18th century. When at last she opens her eyes, the Blackbird and her friends are gone. For her, time has apparently slipped backwards 200 years, and she is once more Lady Jean Grey, now en route to America with the man she loves and will soon marry. So she's in shock about it. It's like lucid dreaming. She has her mind, but her surroundings are completely changed. Look at all the work that Byrne has done here on the interior of the ship. And we get notes here referring to 125 and 126 and previous time slips. And Jason Wingard, looking dashing and handsome, speaks to his betrothed. Is anything amiss, Jean? I thought I heard you cry out. I know we've had a rough passage, my darling, but we'll soon be in New York, and then you'll be mine forever. And she replies, yes, Jason, oh yes, but in her mind she thinks, no, what am I doing? The emotions he stirs within me so intense, must break away while I can. So she runs out on deck for some fresh air to clear her head, she says. She wants to be alone. I thought these time slips were caused by Proteus's reality warping power, she thinks as she goes on deck above. It seems I was mistaken, she thinks, but the alternative is so incredible. Can I actually be psychically shifting in time, reliving the life of one of my ancestors? I suppose for the power of Phoenix, anything is possible. That scares me, she thinks. And again, look at all the work that Byrne has done here with the sailors here pulling the barrels around on the upper deck. and Jean here looking out to sea to the Atlantic. Also Terry Austin's inking technique there. Looks like he's using a grease pencil there for the dark of the sky. Really, really excellent work. Again, this is work that it's transferring pretty well to the newsprint, but looks even better in the original art. So the time slip continues, but then transitions back to the present. Jean thinks here as a man comes up behind her. What really scares me is that these time slips are happening more and more often. Suppose I'm trapped in the past. What will happen to my body in the present? So the man asks Milady, and she turns around. It's the captain. The captain, wait, I know that voice. Scott. So the hat is removed. I saw you come on deck, madam. He says, is anything, he was about to say, amiss or troubling you, Jean? And then we have the switch to Cyclops. And it's so interesting to see the visuals of Cyclops without his ruby quartz visor, what he might look like if he didn't have to wear them all the time. And he's thinking to himself in the present, she's white as a sheet, almost terrified. I'd like to help, he says. And Jean doesn't open up to him. She replies, I don't think you can, Scott. I doubt anyone can. At least let me try, he says. I need to talk to you to explain some things. And Jean replies to him, about your dating Colleen Wing. You needn't. I already know. I've never tapped your mind, Scott. I never will. But I couldn't help picking up stray thoughts from the others. And Cyclops explains, Jean, Colleen's a friend, no more, no less. So this goes back to issue 118. I've done a lot of thinking since your death in Antarctica, a reference to 113, a misperception on his part and the part of the other X-Men. I haven't much liked some of the things I've learned about myself, says Scott. All my life it seemed that every time I turned around, I was losing people I loved. My folks, my brother Alex, the few friends I made at the orphanage, that's the orphanage in Nebraska. Each time the loss hurt, he says. Losing you was the loss I couldn't take. If I'd allowed myself to feel anything, the grief would have broken me, maybe killed me. When I thought you died, it was like my mind shut part of itself off. I felt nothing. Now, this is all very interesting to consider in relation to what will happen in issue 137 in the future, but which the Claremont and Byrne have plotted out. Not that they have 100% knowledge of what's going to happen to Jean there. Jim Shooter will make a decision that will impact on that. But this reads interestingly from the vantage point of 137 and 138 in particular, with Jean's funeral covered in that issue and Cyclops' decision to leave the X-Men. So Cyclops here says to her as he kisses her, Jean, you're everything to me, as necessary as the air I breathe. I used to say I love you without truly knowing what I was talking about. I know now, a little anyway. Jean, I love you. And I you, Scott, with all my heart. Pure Claremontian dialogue there, and I you. But notice she's elided the verb love, which is interesting because of the affair she's having in those time slips with Jason Wingard. Really, really excellent characterization here from Byrne and Claremont, but particularly from Claremont in the dialogue, and the fact that Jean does not share with Scott what's happening to her in those time slips. So he's honest with her and she's not honest with him, is how we can conclude it. So they spend the rest of the flight together, sometimes touching, sometimes kissing, but mostly just talking with an ease they'd never known before. Their dialogue continuing even after Cyclops takes the Blackbird's controls to begin the descent to the X-Men's home school headquarters. So that's an interesting little detail. Nightcrawler's flying the Blackbird, but it's Cyclops who takes over for the vertical landing there. So it touches down on the Xavier estate, and Wolverine here asks Cyclops, something's up. What's up? Intruder alert, Wolverine. Sensors have picked up someone inside the house. The readings are all scrambled though. Can't tell if it's a friend or a foe. So this is, like an old trope from the X-Men comics. Here they are bursting into the mansion to face perhaps a foe. But it turns out to be the Professor. It's Professor X. He's returned. So he's back. Everybody's delighted, at least initially. And the Professor says, "Greetings, my X-Men. It is so very good to see you again, to know that you're all alive and well." And then the narrator tells us Charles Xavier tries to continue, but words fail him. Over the years since he founded the X-Men, he's come to regard his young mutant charges, both old team and new, more like his children than his students. Looking at them now, he realizes just how glad he is to be home, surrounded by those he loves. So everything seems to be going back to the Silver Age status quo. So it appears. I like the screen tone here that Terry Austin has used for the carpet in the X-Mansion. Let's get past these advertisements. And we have a moment here again between Scott and Jean. The days that follow are quiet, lazy, perfect for relaxation and reflection. Scott says to Jean, "It looks like it's autumn." I like the little detail of the... what is that? Is it a squirrel? I'm going to say it's a squirrel bounding ahead on the path in front of Scott and Jean. "I'm glad you stayed up here, Jean," says Cyclops. So she hasn't gone back down to her apartment in the city. "Professor X asked me to," she replies. "He wanted to run some tests." And then she thinks to herself as Scott opens the door for her and they enter into the X-Mansion, "I caught a stray thought. I'm the reason he returned to the school. He's worried about my ability to control Phoenix's power." So Scott asks her, "Is something wrong?" And again, Jean lies to him, or, doesn't tell him the whole deal. Not so long as you're around. So they're walking in the X-Mansion, and Scott here says, "I heard something behind this door." And Jean replies, "Scott, wait, don't you remember? That extra thick door leads to the danger room." Now, for long time readers, they might recognize this as a replay of a scene from Roy Thomas's and Neil Adams' X-Men, Uncanny X-Men number 60. The exact same dialogue there. So Claremont and Byrne deliberately recalling a moment from the Thomas and Adams run, only to have it subverted. So it's the door to the danger room. Wolverine emerges. He doesn't look very happy. Cyclops grabs him by the arm in order to pull him back and get an explanation. And Wolverine snaps, "I'm no kid anymore, Summers, and I'm no flaming amateur. So where does Chrome Dome get off treating me like one? You tell Xavier what I told you, bub. Wolverine don't jump through hoops for nobody." So Scott gets it. It is serious, and I should have seen it coming, he says to Jean. "I just didn't figure things would blow up quite so quickly." So the Professor's back a couple of days. He's running the X-Men through scenarios in the danger room. It's like the Silver Age all over again. Scott comes in. He asks, "Can he speak to the Professor?" "In a moment, Scott," says the Professor. "Nightcrawler, now we will test your agility and wall-crawling abilities. Storm, your airborne maneuver ability. And Colossus, your strength. Scott, notify Wolverine that his childish outburst will cost him 10 demerits." So, yeah, totally back to the Silver Age. But Scott sits down on the control booth there and says, 10 or 10,000, Professor. I doubt they'll mean anything to him. Wolverine's a grown man with years of experience and training in the use of his powers. The same is true for Storm, myself, and Jean. The original X-Men were teenagers with no idea how to cope with their mutant abilities. We're not teenagers or beginners. You can't treat us like we are. I tried it that way. I failed. And the Professor responds, "I am not you." And Scott continues. He says, "No, sir, but you also haven't had much contact with the new X-Men since you formed the team. I've lived with them, worked with them, fought with them. First and foremost, we're individuals. We can't mesh into the same kind of team as the original X-Men because we're not the same kind of people." So this is intriguing. What's going on in the background of this is a debate between the creators here, Claremont and Byrne, and the editor, Jim Shooter. Because Shooter thought that what made the X-Men unique as a concept among the stable of Marvel superheroes was the fact that they lived in a school and that they trained and did exams and so on and so forth. And so he wanted the professor back in the school and wanted, in some measure, return to the status quo of the Silver Age. And both Byrne and Claremont were not happy with that. They rather felt that the X-Men had matured, that they'd moved beyond that particular setup. And so we're getting that worked out here in the dialogue between Xavier and Cyclops. And Xavier responds to his former pupil, "Forgive me my bluntness, Scott, but to me that betokens a failure of leadership on your part." It's kind of harsh. "This anarchy is a result of your failure to teach these mutants how to be a team." And Cyclops responds, "Professor, we are a team, and we've seen them be a team under Cyclops' expert leadership in the Proteus affair in the previous 3 issues. So the professor is completely out of the loop. Quiet, he says. He's like in this headmaster's persona, which is completely outdated. You're correct. I have been remiss in my duties. I have not taught the new X-Men, in part because I trusted you to take that responsibility. That lapse will be speedily rectified." And so Scott here is thinking, he's not telling the professor to go and take a hike, but he thinks, how do I reach him? I know I'm right, but... And then the alarm goes off. It's Cerebro. Cerebro's contact alarm. "My scanning device has discovered a new mutant." And I love the fact that in the background, we have the dutiful Nightcrawler, Storm, and Colossus going through their paces in the danger room. Including Terry Austin here using the screen tone on Storm's cloak as well. So much detail here. The map on the computer screen, and it's zeroed in on, you can see there the cities identified as Toledo, Cleveland, and Chicago here. There's a red dot on Chicago and on New York. So the professor says, "Scanner indicates 2 mutants, both manifesting abilities unknown to Cerebro's memory banks, and both potentially quite powerful." So of course that was, an original mission of the professors to identify new mutants and then recruit them to the school for training in the management of their mutant talents, but also potentially be recruited into the X-Men. And Scott continues thinking, this is crazy. To him, I'm still the untried kid who's allowed only so much responsibility with the X-Men and no more. The professor continues, he's totally blind to what's going on in respect of how his pupil, Cyclops, his first X-Man, has grown up and matured and really doesn't need the professor's guidance anymore. So the professor continues, absorbed in the readouts from Cerebro, 1 in Chicago, 1 in New York City. That means if we're to contact them as quickly and efficiently as possible, we'll have to split the team. You and Jean take the New York contact, Scott. I'll take Colossus, Storm, and Wolverine out with me to Chicago. I want to see how they operate in the field. But who is watching on the other side of the screen, so to speak? It's Mastermind. He's everywhere. Most impressive gentleman. Poor Xavier, if only he knew that the Hellfire Club has a tap on his precious Cerebro and that every scrap of data in its memory banks is ours for the asking. Your man Warhawk did his bugging well, his bugging work well. So that's a reference to Uncanny X-Men 110. So this has all been seeded well over a year earlier. And here we get our first look at the Hellfire Club. And we see the suits from the cards there, hearts, clubs, diamonds, and spades. And we have shadowy figures there seated behind the table. We'll contact those mutants, just as Xavier plans to. Only the Hellfire Club will get there first and recruit them by hook or by crook. And if along the way we manage to acquire or eliminate some of the X-Men, so much the better. So who's speaking there? It's Sebastian Shaw. Shaw, you may be chairman of the Hellfire Club and one of the most powerful industrialists in America, but if you think the X-Men are going to be pushovers, think again. Far better men than you have pledged their destruction, yet the X-Men are still here. They are dangerous. So are we, Wingard, replies Shaw. As the X-Men will soon discover, won't they, my dear White Queen? As you say, Shaw. So this is the first appearance of Emma Frost, aka the White Queen. And the first appearance of the Hellfire Club, though in shadow, though in silhouette. It's a cameo appearance. We'll see them more clearly in upcoming issues. Now, of course, for the Hellfire Club, Claremont and Byrne were drawing on their shared love of the British TV series The Avengers, and drawing on a particular episode of the Avengers TV series, A Touch of Brimstone. So they're drawing on that particular series for the concepts here behind the Hellfire Club, a gentleman's club that is dedicated to the acquisition of power and to the corruption of those who come into its ambit. So then the scene switches to Chicago, and this is a device of Claremont's that I've always enjoyed, which is he gives you a little kind of introduction to the location. So you can imagine this. We've got a nice lake view shot of the city with signature buildings to identify it, an indication that it is Chicago, and you could just leave it at that. You could leave it at that and move on. But instead, Claremont gives us a little tourist's package concerning Chicago, the Windy City, celebrated in verse by Sandberg, in song by Sinatra, home of the world's tallest building, and, so they say, best pizza. 3 million plus people live in this sprawling, tough, passionate, old new metropolis. Our concern, however, is not with the city proper, but with one of its suburbs. And then we segue to Deerfield, and another new character, Kitty Pryde, Catherine Pryde, heading home from dance class, and her world is slowly falling apart. So in her suburban home, there is a blonde woman, and she is Ms. Frost. She represents a very good school in Massachusetts, and she says to Kitty, "Hello, Catherine, I'm sure we're going to be great friends." And you can see that Kitty's skeptical there with her raised eyebrow. And her mother, Terry, says, "Are you all right, precious? You're home awfully early." "I had another one of those darn headaches," says Kitty. "You go upstairs and lie down," says her mother. "I'll bring you some aspirin in a minute." So upstairs we get a shot of Kitty's room. She's 13 and a half years old. She is a teenager. We see in her room she's got copies of the Fantastic Four, the Hulk. She's got a poster of Baryshnikov there on the wall. Intriguing stuff, the way that Byrne has furnished her room, typical of a teenager, middle-class teenager of the period. "I don't need aspirin," she thinks, "Mom. I need a new head. This one's about to bust wide open. I guess Mom and Dad are serious about splitting up if they're talking about sending me away to school. I've told them I didn't want to go. I like it in Deerfield, and all my friends are here, but what I want doesn't count. Where'd they dredge up that Ms. Frost anyway? She looked at me like it was something good to eat. Ick. She gives me the creeps." So great dialogue in her thought balloons there from Claremont. He's absolutely nailing the voice of a 13 and a half year old teenager. There's nothing hokey or off about her diction, her phrasing, her way of thinking. It is spot on. It is convincing work. And it's been said before that Kitty Pryde is the first realistic teenager in superhero comics. Just compare it to the way that Rick Jones was written by Stan Lee in the 60s, and you really get a sense of exactly that difference. So one of her headaches strikes her again, and she lies down on her bed there. Again, we get to see more posters in her room, including a poster of Kermit the Frog. And I like the little detail of the fact that maybe she put that up when she was 10, but now she's older and she's put up a poster of Kiss, the band Kiss, and its frontman. And so you get a sense of how her tastes have developed as she has grown up. From, as I said, like maybe 10 to 13. But she lies back on her bed and she thinks, "Please God, I'm only 13 and a half. I can't be dying. Somebody stop the hurting. Please make it stop." And it stops just like that. Slowly, gingerly, Kitty opens her eyes and she's down in the living room on the floor. How did it happen? This is a great sequence here. Like, we're figuring it out. The reader's figuring out what her power might be in the same speed or at the same pace that she's putting it together. That's really well handled by Byrne and Claremont, in my opinion. So the parents come in from the garden with Ms. Frost, and they're wondering what on earth she's doing down on the floor. So she says, I came down for a glass of water and snagged my sneaker on the carpet. I fell. Her father's worried about her. She says she's fine. She races upstairs to do her homework. I don't know what's gotten into that girl, says Carmen. I apologise for her behaviour to Ms. Frost. You needn't, Mr. Pryde. She responds, I love the detail of the postbox with the family name on it as well. I understand perfectly, says Ms. Frost. Kitty's at that age, that awkward age. You have my school's brochures. I'll be in touch. Now, this is a great little scene here where she's walking on the pavement, passing by an interesting and eye-catching looking trio with a man in a wheelchair. So Ms. Frost thinks to herself, the father likes my school, the mother does not. I'll have to make sure his view prevails. We don't know yet that she has psionic powers. So it's only hinted at here in the phrasing in her thought balloon. And then she recognizes the X-Men. She knows all about them, but she doesn't give that away. Nice looking frail, thinks Wolverine. Something about her scent, though, raises the hackles on my neck. Wonder why. So he has intuited via his senses that there's something off about her, but he knows no more than that. And then we have the introduction here between the professor and Carmen Pryde. So they're brought into the family home, and Kitty's there peeking around the corner at the top of the landing. And Carmen says, Kitty, your mom and I have business to discuss with Professor Xavier. Since you seem to be feeling a lot better, you interested in a trip to the malt shop with his students here? My treat. So here we've got a great panel of the booth in the malt shop where Kitty is having a triple scoop super duper ice cream soda, and Storm too. So the two are sitting down here in the booth, and the two guys are out here checking out the magazines. But if you zoom in and pay close attention to what is going on and what exactly the magazine is that Wolverine is reading here with a big grin on his face, it's Hustler magazine. And you can see the kind of shock there in Peter's face as he's looking over Wolverine's shoulder at what is very likely naked women. And so that is funny stuff. And you can see here that the proprietor is not at all happy with Wolverine reading his magazines for free, his dirty magazines for free. In the dialogue between young Kitty Pryde and Storm, Kitty's saying, we got black kids in my school, Aurora, but none of them look like you. I mean, white hair and blue eyes. And Storm replies, so far as I know, Kitty, I'm one of a kind, and so are you. You mean because I'm so smart? No, something else. Kitty, have you ever heard of the X-Men? So this is intriguing from the era. The X-Men have a superhero type reputation in the era, and Kitty has heard of them. Sure, they're superheroes or something like the Avengers. They were just in a big fight in Scotland. So the Proteus fight must have made the news, is what we infer. Hey, are you them? She says, smiling. And Storm smiles back. We are. Professor Xavier said it was all right to tell you. So Kitty's delighted. Gosh, can I have your autograph? And Storm thinks, so much energy and life and joy. If not for an accident of war, I might have been like this at Kitty's age. Instead, I was walking alone across the Sudan. I hadn't yet learned I could soar on the winds. In that desert, I almost died. So interesting, Claremont here, using this interview between Storm, friendly, light interview between Storm and Kitty, to explore their contrasting childhoods and how Storm had such a tragic childhood because of the death of her parents while she was only 8 years old. Meanwhile, the proprietor, he's had enough of Wolverine sneaking peeks at his dirty magazines. You can see him there enjoying a copy of Penthouse. This ain't no library, fella, he says. You want to read the magazine? Buy the magazine. So Wolverine, big smirk on his face, says, I don't like being tapped, bub, or ordered around. And Colossus whispers, Wolverine, no. And the proprietor, he's not put off. He says, I don't like people reading without paying. Want to make something of it? Thought you'd never ask. says Wolverine as he grabs him by the apron. And then Colossus twigs, Wolverine behind you, and then we have our cover scene. So these knights of the Hellfire Club, they crashed through the front window of the malt shop. And now, finally, we're a good 14 pages into the issue or so, we get action. So we were promised action on the cover, and most readers in the time period would expect at least 50 to 60% of a superhero magazine comic to be action. And this one wasn't. It was all intrigue, it was all character moments, it was all setup for the upcoming Dark Phoenix saga, and only here towards the end of the issue do we get our conventional action sequences. So we have this one going up against Colossus with a flamethrower. Colossus can feel the heat. Wolverine goes up against the other guy, but his battle suit has a force field, so Wolverine's claws can't even touch him. And Kitty, in horror and kind of self-preservation instinct, is knocked and phases through the wall of the malt shop. The blow hurls Wolverine the length of the shop instinctively, and with a yelp of mingled surprise and fear, Kitty Pryde kicks herself backwards to get out of the way. That kick sends her a lot farther than she'd anticipated. So I'm outside, she thinks. I pushed myself right through the wall, but that's impossible. Feel so tired, dizzy, never felt this way before, want to stay awake, but can't. Great lettering by Orzechowski, that tiny, tiny script there, as Kitty goes unconscious on the other side of the wall. And then we can infer that her power is a type of phasing ability. Then back in the shop itself, the battle continues raging. Great inking here by Orzechowski for the delineation of Storm's wins against this particular Knight of the Hellfire Club. Use of screen tone there as well. And then Wolverine gets an idea. Storm, listen up. Each of these gonzos seems equipped to counter our specific powers. Let's see what happens if we switch partners. So that's the tactic that works. And then once they switch the antagonists, they're able to deal with these Knights of the Hellfire Club handily enough. And then Storm wonders, perhaps she says, I wish Scott were here. These men knew our powers and how to defeat them, but how? So we know it's because the Hellfire Club have a tap on Cerebro and the X-Men's computers. Wolverine here suggests, totally in keeping with his character, let's wake the suckers up and ask him. I think I can persuade him to tell us all they know. But they're attacked by a telepathic force bolt. They fight the mental ambush using psychic techniques taught them by Professor X and Phoenix, but the outcome is never in doubt. With a smile, Emma Frost, the White Queen, watches them fall. So now it's revealed that Ms. Frost was the White Queen, that her powers, she has mutant powers, and she's got telepathic powers just like Phoenix. They're unconscious. Load them aboard the hovercraft, she says to the Hellfire Club soldier. So he and his crew do so, and then we get a shot of their craft here with the Hellfire Club logo there, the trident and the H. And the White Queen says the Hellfire Clubs knows every facet of the X-Men, every parameter of their mutant powers, their strengths, their weaknesses, how they fight, how they think. That gives us an unbeatable edge. And she orders one of the men, let's go. After we turn these prisoners over to the lab, we'll go after Xavier himself and see if we can't make this a clean sweep of the X-Men. And he asks her, what about our 3 armoured units? We left them inside. Oh, don't worry about them, Cutler, she says. The Hellfire Club has ways of dealing with failures. So there's a big explosion from the malt shop. Hopefully all the civilians got out of there. Probably they all scarpered with the fight. And let's get past the advertisements here. Although I think some people are interested in reading the Hostess fruit pie ads. So you can have a read of that if you wish. And let's continue then. That's it. Like, we're already at the last page here. 17 pages, but it really feels like 22, if not more. Emma Frost explains here, and we get a sense of the morality of the Hellfire Club from this. Those men had power and training sufficient to defeat the X-Men without my help. They botched their job, and now the explosive charges in their armor have rewarded them for their handiwork. Don't act so shocked, Cutler. We pay good wages. We expect our money's worth. So then we have an interior shot of the craft making its way to a massive industrial park on the outskirts of Chicago. And the White Queen orders strip them, search their uniforms and their persons carefully, remove anything that might be used as a weapon or signaling device, take special care with Storm. We know about the lockpicks in her headdress. So they were first used and revealed in Uncanny X-Men 113 when the X-Men were held prisoner by Magneto in the Antarctic. Make sure she hasn't any other surprises. I'll keep them telepathically sedated until we reach the lab. So the implication of this is there's going to be a full body cavity search of the X-Men. It's just implied. It's between the lines of what she's saying. It will go over the head of a 10-year-old, but not an 18-year-old reader. So I mean, like, this is wild stuff in a way. The Hellfire Club mean absolute business. These are not Silver Age style villains. And one of the soldiers asks, "What about the girl, the Pryde kid?" And the White Queen replies, "She escaped in the confusion. The X-Men were always our primary target. Now that we have them, she'll keep. When we want her, we know where to find her." But what's happening there on the wall behind the White Queen? It's Kitty Pryde. So she recovered from her swoon. I did it, she thinks. I concentrated and I'm walking right through the wall from the rear compartment. I feel tingly all over, but not as tired as the last time, and my headaches are all gone. And then she sees that the X-Men have been captured. Oh no, that creepy Miss Frost and her goon squad are holding the X-Men prisoners. Why? Why did I decide to snoop around in here? I gotta help them. But how? These guys have guns and superpowers, and I'm all alone. So that is quite the cliffhanger for the conclusion to this issue. And next up, debut of the Dazzler, something to do with the other signal in New York, we might infer. Next issue, so far it's Hellfire Club 1, X-Men 0, and half our mutant team doesn't even know they're about to be attacked. In addition, we'll present more on cute Kitty Pryde and present yet another brand new mutant, the mysterious Dazzler, plus more of Jason Wingard and his plans for Phoenix. Be here in 30, people. The Big Apple disco scene may never be the same again. And, you know, it's funny because by this point, the end of 1979, the disco scene was over. It was a new scene that was coming into effect. So a couple of letters here. This first one is interesting regarding praise, or it includes praise for Glynis Oliver's colours. And even though this issue wasn't coloured by Glynis Oliver, most of the coming ones will be. And the response here is that Glynis has been receiving a great many favourable notices. X-Men is one of her favourite books to colour, indeed one she specifically asked for. We think she's been doing an unsurpassable job. And over here there is another interesting letter about the politics of the arcade issues. It's too bad Hannah Arendt didn't read comics or concepts of the appalling banality of evil. Seems almost comfortable in companion to this story's elaborate demonstration of the entertainment value of evil. So a thoughtful letter from Margaret O'Connell, which gets a thoughtful response, very likely from Chris Claremont there. And there you go. Like I said, 17 pages of story and art, only a couple of pages of action at the end. The cover belies the fact that most of this issue is intrigue. Most of this issue is a setup as if we're going back to the Silver Age, and then it is subverted by the fact that Cyclops is just not at all on board anymore with the professor's backwards treatment of these adult trained characters, and that the professor's view of the team and him as leader is just out of kilter and out of step with what has happened between these new X-Men and how they've gelled and bonded over the previous issues and adventures they've had, as well as the fact that we are on issue 1 of Dark Phoenix Saga as that was collected in the first trade paperback collection. So lots and lots packed into this. Just as I said, like stunning to think. It's only 17 pages. Really fantastic work. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.